What's up, Vet TV? I am here with author and veteran Ben Sledge to talk to you guys a little bit about working in the creative space, not only as a veteran, but somebody who has managed to take what they learned in the military and apply it to who they are today. Ben, how are you? And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be on with you again. I loved getting to meet you while we were in California filming for non-commissioned news. Name is Benjamin Sledge. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, to be honest. I'm a author. I just came out with a new book called Where Cowards Go to Die with a major publisher. It just won the New York City Big Book Award and is up for about 5 other different awards right now. So that's, if you like war stories and beyond that, that's something a little bit different than what's currently out there, then I would encourage you to check it out. I'm also a web developer and graphic designer.
Right
I
on.
do professional writing. So yeah, I actually got my degree in graphic design and electronic media. So was a creative director for about 13 years. Did the military. And then on top of that, I have multiple certifications in crisis response, trauma care, and suicide prevention because I worked for a nonprofit in the music industry at the metal music industry specifically for about 10 years. So I've just kind of been all over the map, and now I run my own company doing kind of a little bit of everything, ranging from keynote speeches, training people on veteran mental health, to graphic design, web development, to ghostwriting and writing. So just creative all over the place is
Right
really kind
on.
of been my life since I was a kid.
Now, as a creative, somebody who is in the creative space, is there a specific emotion that you feel that drives you to do or create something that others can genuinely connect to? Is there a genuine connection that's inspired by emotion that you feel? Like, what is it? Is it happiness? Is it sadness? What is that feeling that you get?
I love being able to put into words what people inherently feel on the inside.
Okay.
And so when people resonate with that, whether it's a design or it's something that I've written, that to me brings me the greatest amount of joy. Because anybody can create anything, but I think the reason that we all create inherently, and it's somewhat selfish, is the fact that we want other people to feel, or we
Mm,
want them specifically to connect with the artwork that we've made, whether it's
right.
in their personal life or it's something that they're deeply feeling. So for me, I'm a huge metalhead, and I love music that honestly just speaks to my soul about some of the things that I've gone through in my life. So I think all of us try to connect with an audience in some way, shape, or form that ultimately brings us joy for the fact that they were able to connect with the piece of art that we
Yeah.
created that meant something to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think being able to take a piece of information and apply it to metrics that help it fit somebody else's perception so they can receive it and learn from it and continue forward. So it's really cool that you said that, because I want to ask you, what is the best piece of work that you feel like you created channeled by that specific emotion or the need to help share information in a more positive light?
Honestly, it was my book. There's two actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not two books, but there's two pieces of
Oh,
art
I was like,
that
I
I
missed a
feel.
book. Okay.
So that was something I poured my heart and soul into that I had never wanted to actually write about or talk about or anything. And you and I have discussed this at length, where I just came home and I hustled just like you
Mm,
did. I was like, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to be one of the silent brotherhood. I've already dealt with the weird looks, the whole 9 yards. And when I started writing, my editor really just challenged me on that. And she said, it's a travesty because you guys are the smallest minority in the entire United States. Less than 1% of you has fought in the longest running wars of the history of the United States. We need to hear your stories. And she said, it's a travesty you won't talk about it because we as the populace need that. And that's why there's such a big disconnect. And it really changed my perspective. And so I poured my heart and soul into that, and to see other veterans and then just the civilian populace too really connect with it has meant the world to me. The other piece that I'm absolutely in love with was an article that I wrote for Medium.
mm.
And I didn't write it for it to happen this way, but it went insane viral, like
Oh, wow.
close to like 1 million views and just nuts. And it was during that heyday where everybody was like talking about toxic masculinity and kind of all this other stuff. And I, you know, for me as a veteran, I was like, man, on the battlefield, I have hugged and cried with dudes, and yet there's still this like warrior ethos inside of me. And so I wrote about some of my experience, and the fact that a lot of men feel very deeply, but also at the same time, we love that warrior ethos. We have to have a challenge and battle, and people freaking loved it. So that I was really proud of that piece, and it just connected at a level in a way where a lot of society felt divided at the time.
So this woman, your publisher?
No, she was my editor at
Your
age.
editor
Challenged me, yeah.
You're telling me that she was the straw on the camel's back that said, you need to talk about this. What was there more to it? Was it just she had a way of connecting with you the same way that you connect with people now?
We had built a relationship, and the way that it started out was I was doing work for the platform Medium, and they were taking, you know, contract pieces, and so I worked on her with a very large scale investigative journalism piece that took like a year for us to work on, fact checking, you know, running sources, the whole 9 yards. It was nuts.
Did she hear about your military stories during that time? Did you kind of like talk to her about it a little bit?
No, I had written another piece that went also crazy viral, and like all the military places picked it up. It was called The Conversation We Refuse to Have About War and Our Veterans. And it was basically about, you know, how we're this small microcosm. And I had learned about moral injury, which is the psychological damage that occurs when soldiers have to do things that violate their sense of right and wrong. And I was like, dude, this is like what I struggle more with, because everyone's like, oh, it's PTSD and all this other stuff. And so I showed in combat, there's like these very morally ambiguous situations that you're just in sometimes, and wrote about that. It was forever ago, and she loved it. And so we'd worked on a million other pieces, everything from mental health to investigative journalism to, I mean, it was all over the map. And I went to her one day, and I was kind of having writer's block, and said, hey, what do you want me to write on? And she was like, man, we love your stuff on war. And I was like, I've written about it once. I'm never going to do it again. And that's when she had that conversation with me. And I realized she was right. She said she said, I lost my grandfather's because he wouldn't talk about it. And we need to hear those stories from World War II and Vietnam and the Korean War. And she's like, and you guys really won't talk about it. And I was just like, ugh. It just kind of cut to the heart, you know? And I realized that I needed to spend some time writing my experiences. So, yeah.
You know, people like yourself are the man on the concertina wire. You know what I mean by that? You guys are the ones who are willing to throw yourself down so others can get past you. You know, you're laying the groundwork so that future generations of veterans don't have to feel like a lot of us feel, to where you're not a man if you talk about it, or people think you're lying if you talk about it. And it's a stigma that's really us only gatekeeping our own mental health. I have to ask, you've came so far. What would the younger version of you think now? What would he say? Would he be proud of you? How would he feel about you where you're at today?
I think he'd be proud. He'd probably be in awe a little bit, because I mean, I was this weird jingoistic artsy kid, you know, who joined the military because my family had, and I had to pay for college some way.
Right.
Now everybody's getting student loan forgiveness, and I'm like, damn it.
Yeah.
So you know, I think he would be proud. He was always, you know, honestly, growing up, I was the shy artistic kid. I was beanpole skinny. I had long hair down to here. I was basically Eddie Munson from Stranger Things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I got picked on, bullied, beat up a lot. And so I, you know, kind of in high school, I decided I have to like kill that dude and become this strong, you know, macho dude. And it didn't go well. So I think the fact that he'd be able to see me as, you know, inherently adapting and making a career out of the creative is something that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be an artist growing up, always, ever since I was like 3 years old. And so I took all the art classes that I could in high school, obviously got made fun of there. Then when I went to college, it was graphic design and electronic media. And so out of that, I think in some respects, he'd be very, very proud of the the role and way that I took. But I think if you would have asked, what about the guy in his 20s
Yeah.
who was trying to be the man, I think he'd think I'm a pussy.
No.
but that guy was an idiot. So,
Yeah, I think it was around, in my experience, I got out in early 2012. I didn't talk about it at all, except in passing to people that I was having a genuine conversation with.
hmm,
2020, November 2020 was the first time where I was genuinely like, here's me talking about this to like a larger group of people. And you start getting the feedback of some people who still think you're not a man to talk about it, that you're weak to talk about. And then you start to forgive them because you realize I was like them before too.
right.
You know, we talked a little bit about you in the past and kind of what you've accomplished now. There's some people who are watching this, and I want to make sure that we give them the information that maybe you had to learn the hard way so they won't have to learn it the hard way. What would you feel like is the biggest time waster from the time that you left the military until you became the person you are today?
The biggest time, I can tell you that it's chasing other people's approval and accolades. Like
Mm,
I'm a people pleaser through and through, so I will bend over backwards and kill myself and do things that I shouldn't even necessarily do and care about opinions that I shouldn't necessarily care about. And when you get involved in that cycle, you end up doing dumb things like taking on, and especially as a creative, because you're
mm.
wanting to people please, you'll take on projects you totally shouldn't, and do it
Yeah.
for free. And then on top of that, you'll alienate your friends and family because you start to overwork
Mm,
and you become kind of a slave to that hustle culture because you're constantly people pleasing. And so if your identity is wrapped up and constantly about what other people think, you're ultimately going to be continually let down because people are just messy and busted and they're going to do dumb stuff. But you're the one who's constantly trying to appease everybody and never let anybody be mad. And so it wasted years off my life doing that.
do you feel like it was emotionally draining as well as just physically draining to help these other people?
Oh, for sure. Because then at some point, resentment would build. And then I'd be like, F this, I'm out. I hate everything, and
Right,
I'd burn out and then I'd blow up and not
right.
just blow up, in the business aspect, but also blow up on my family. And my wife's like, you're just a crazy person right now. You're way too stressed out.
Yeah.
So I try and take more of there's a like I really love C.S. Lewis. I've always loved the Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien. I'm just nerding out about Rings of Power, and he talks in one of his books about inherently how there are people in life who actually like happiness, and he
Mhm.
says, and for whatever strange reason, there are people that just don't, that they prefer to be
Right.
unhappy. And I was like, man, I would rather be one of the people that's just inherently happy, regardless of the situations that are ongoing in my life.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to be happy and have joy if I'm constantly wondering what everybody thinks about me or, doing these projects because I want people to think I'm awesome.
That's a surprising thing that a lot of people learn the hard way, and I know I did too, is learning that some people only thrive in toxic work environments, toxic relationships, because maybe there's the psychology of that's how they grew up, that's how they experienced love, that's what they expected inside their household. I'm glad you're not one of them because I feel like that you're making a difference in the veteran community. And we need more people who don't thrive in negativity. And I
Oh,
feel like the future version of you
it's
is
negative out there right now for the
it,
vet community.
it's
Woo!
very negative, and it's like the more you get in the mud, you just get more mud on you. You're not getting cleaner by participating in it whatsoever. Um, so what's a goal that a future version of you would wish that you would just accomplish already? So you never become that person, by the way. Like what's a goal 10 years from now? If I were to talk to future Ben, we already talked to past Ben and what he would think of you. Future Ben, if I would say, what do you wish you would have just shut up and just did so that you could be more successful quicker than you already are?
Um, for me, I think we get with this state of the world and everything ranging from inflation, you start to worry about finances, but I have to remind myself that, I was totally comfortable living on a cot. And as
Mm,
long as I had, shelter over my head and some food, I was comfortable. And a lot of times I think there's this old quote, it says, you know, we spend our lives trying to like accumulate all this wealth so that we can buy things that we don't need to impress people we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just taking on more of like that simplicity in my lifestyle, but being content with anything that I do and being proud of what I've worked on. So for me, that looks like tangibly writing more books. And I would love to like win some awards. I'd love to be a bestseller, but at the end of the day, I want the reason that I write to be because of the fact that I have to write. The same way creators have to create, whether that's a musician has to create music, or you know, a streamer has to stream, or whatever, or a video gamer on Twitch has to play games to, you know, to their do it because I love it, not because I'm necessarily seeking after that paycheck. Now, granted, finances are important, you got to take care of your family, but I think a lot of times we get into these mindsets of, especially ever since the 80s, it's just like greed has become rampant. And for me, I go, what does it look like to be content with what I have, to do my best at what I put, you know, to do excellence with everything that I have, whether it's my business or writing or, you know, keynote speeches, talking about mental health. Is if I can accomplish that and then, you know, spend less time at work and more time with my kids and my wife, that's a big win. That's ultimately the goal in 10 years.
With your good attitude and your understanding of what you need to do to succeed in your field, this is good advice. Like, I want more of it. I want to know, get petty for me here. Feel free to get sassy. All right.
Let me get sassy then.
Tell me, when you talk to the younger guys who want to break into your field, who want to break into writing, who want to break into creative space, especially if they're military veterans,
I got it.
What do you wish they could all just stop doing that's hindering them? Like, what is hurting them from getting to your level?
It's the same that you're going to experience. Everybody wants to be this immediate one-hit wonder, or not even one-hit wonder, just immediate gratification. Like, let me tell you a story, because I think you'll love this and it'll tie everything together. For me to get any good at writing, I had to get a writing mentor. And one of my best friends when I was living in Austin, Texas, is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. His name's 𝙎𝙩𝙧𝙚. And he's one of the most gifted communicators I've ever met in my entire life. Blows me away. Want to be totally exactly like him. Yeah. Just has a way with words. And so I asked him one day, I said, Josh, how did you become a writer? And he picks up his drink and he sips it. He's very, you know, just kind of even killed, one of those dudes that oozes cool. And he says, first, I need you to ask me how many times I've been rejected. And I go, what? And I was like, how many times you've been rejected? And he goes, Ben, right now there's probably 100,000 people in Austin, Texas that want to become writers. And he said, of that 100,000, he said, maybe half of them will sit down and write something, and it'll be terrible because it's their first foray into it. And he said, so that'll have that number. And then about 25,000 people will start writing something, and it'll be terrible too. And, you know, their cat or their parents will read or clap for it or whatever, and they'll be disappointed. So they'll quit. And he said, this process continues until probably there's only maybe really 100 people in Austin that are actually serious about writing and who will continue to write. And he goes, now ask me how many times I've been rejected before I got, you know, Wall Street Journal list. And I said, how many rejection letters you gotten, Josh? And he goes, over 600.
Wow.
And I was like, and I just realized that most everyone thinks that, like, what, okay, why aren't my views taking off? Why aren't my, and so I get really upset with young writers that are like, I want to write the, you know, next military fiction or whatever. And they sit down and they write something, and it sucks because it's their first for it. They may have some knack or some gift for it, but it, you know, I tell young guys this all the time. Discipline is the defining fire by which talent becomes ability. It's as simple as that. If you're disciplined enough to sit down and write, and you have that talent, you will, at the end of the day, eventually make those steps forward in progress. But don't think it's going to happen in just a day, a week, 6 months, even a year. You have to take that time to build that platform, that audience, to hone your skills, to get better at it. Nobody ends up in just special forces. And like, even when guys graduate buds, they're not like Navy SEALs at that level. They've just been through the ringer. they haven't actually been through the training yet. They've just showed that they can accomplish the physical constraints and requirements of them. Same for the guys who go through special forces, Marine recon. They go through the ringer first, and then they begin to learn. And as they learn, they get better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And that's really what it is. So I grow so tired of hearing that one. Well, like, well, I tried and it just didn't. And I'm like, please come talk to me. You know how long it took me? Everyone's like, how'd you get a book deal? I was like, I wrote for years. I read to my cat sometimes because she was the only person who would listen.
Can you say that quote again?
Discipline is the defining fire by which talent becomes ability.
I might have to steal that one from you. That's not, doesn't have any copyright on it, does it? Oh, that's mine. I could just,
all right.
So. All right. Let's all pretend, everyone who's watching this interview, that I came up with that. You know what? You know which one? I like that because the one I typically tell people is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I feel like so many people who have a natural knack aren't willing to respect something as a craft. So even though you feel like you can get your thoughts across on a piece of paper, it's other people's perception. It's not your own perception of whether or not it's good. I think that's a good, mission statement that people can kind of uphold, because when they get out of the military, they want to be Ben Sledge. They don't want to be Boots again, because that's what we are when we get out of the military. We feel like 21, 22, 23-year-old Boots again, and we want the respect from what we've earned. But in the civilian world, you're only as good as your last sale, or you're only as good as your last piece of progress. So what's your biggest pet peeve when people talk about your work? What's your biggest pet peeve when people review your book? What do you wish they knew more about before they left something, I don't know, you didn't agree with necessarily?
For me, it's just dumb comments that like literally that's based more out of their personal experience as opposed to being objective.
Yeah.
But I also live, there's this author, Donald Miller. I read him a long time ago. He wrote this book called Blue Like Jazz and A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And he does like marketing now. He's totally switched, which is kind of funny. But he talked about it in this one seminar one time. He said, there's just basically an 80-20 rule in life. He said, 80% of people, if you pour your heart and soul and you do good work, he said, 80% of people are going to love it. And he said, 20% of them are just going to poo-poo on it. Just crap all over it in the whole 9 yards. And I was like, it's true. And so you just kind of have to develop thick skin. And that's what I've realized. I realize a lot of times that they're writing these dumb comments have to do with their own hurt. But then it's the ones that I think for me, it's the really petty ones that are like, I didn't like the book cover. And I'm just like, okay. That's just like personal preference, that it literally has nothing to do with the story inside. They are at that point judging a book by its cover. And I'm just like, okay, we can't talk or be friends.
I like that you actually get to use that saying in a literal sense. I feel like that's good. So before we end this here, do you have anything you'd like to say for the 21, 22-year-old veteran, or somebody who's about to become a veteran, that you wish the older generation would just tell you as you're entering the civilian world?
Yeah. I think it goes back to why you and I struggled so hard after we got out. And so for those of you that are watching, like when Matt and I talked, we buried the military behind us and just got on with life. I was like, I'm going to get on with life and marriage and career and all this other stuff. But the problem was it just ate me from the inside. And it doesn't matter if you're a combat veteran or you're just a veteran that's getting out who did their time. There's something that inherently happens when you're in that brotherhood and that sisterhood and that camaraderie together. And the tough part is when you get out into the civilian world, you're going to discover that they don't have the same values as you. We always believe, Marine Corps and Army and every military entity in between, that leaders eat last. Unfortunately, in the civilian world, they tend to eat first. And then on top of that, people try to trample each other to get to the top. My challenge to the young guys that are just getting out is take what you learned in the military and carry it into your workplace and career. Those warrior ethos, those values. Don't give up. Don't accept defeat. Don't leave a man behind. But the biggest thing that you really need to do is not bury those experiences. You need to find other men and women that are vets. They can be older, they can be younger, and they can help you transition in that process. Because I found that the best I've ever felt was the more that I got involved with other people that are veterans and military, the better I felt, because of the fact that I felt that camaraderie again. I felt people that understood me, but also at the same time, I was willing to, when I finally moved past my own ego, I was willing to, you know, talk about my experience. And then I decided once more to live by the values that I learned in the military. And I believe that that has really set me up for success, because in a world that is constantly about you get yours, don't sacrifice for anybody, you know, everybody's toxic, these weird labels that, you know, TikTok armchair, you know, philosophers, theologians, and wannabe mental health specialists talk about, it's all wrong. And what you need to do is carry that message forward, because you're going to be an asset as opposed to a detriment in the workplace. And you're actually going to encourage, inspire people. They're going to be like, man, why didn't he give up? Why didn't he accept defeat? Why did he, you know? And it's just because of those military values. So community, and then carry your values forward that you learned from the military into everything that you do.
Where were you 10 years ago when I needed you?
I was dying in a pile right next to you. Like, no joke. I was smack dab in like 12-step and counseling.
Yeah, I think I was at the unemployment office. They said, "So what, did you lose your job?" "No, I just got out of the military. I just want to
Yeah.
chill." They said, "You're not supposed to tell us that." I was like, I wish somebody would have mentored me on how to do this whole civilian thing. I want to give a huge shout out to,
I was sleeping on
yeah.
my best friend's couch because I didn't have anywhere to go, you know? So
Getting out of the military is such a confusing thing, because you feel like a man, but you're not. Like, now that I'm 34, and I think a 22-year-old, I can't even hire you most of the time, because it's just, you don't have the skill set, or I don't know, the experience to be able to accomplish what I need you to. And it's like, that's how the older generation looked at me, but I felt like I had been through so much. Um, you know what? This has been a delight. Surprisingly, a delight. Not surprisingly for you, for me, I was nervous to get to interview you and actually talk to you in kind of a more formal setting. I want to give a huge shout out to Vet TV, everybody who's watching. This has been an interview with author, veteran, and Purple Heart recipient, Ben Sledge. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.